One quick question, sir. Sorry.
Okay, we are live.
Okay.
All right. So okay, we have a countdown. I think we'll start joining in now.
Great.
So hello guys, welcome to tonight's class. If you are viewing this now, you can go ahead to drop a message on your Discord channel to get more people to join this call. We already have your instructor here, Ibasa Ibrahim. He is a Git head of education at GitHub, and is also an engineer at African to Silicon Valley, and he'll be taking you for tonight's class. So if you have not followed us, please follow us on Twitch. If you're yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Okay, our instructor will be right back. I think he experienced a network glitch. Let's give him a minute. Oh, okay. Welcome back, Ibasa. I guess that was your network. If you can hear me, please go ahead to mute your mic and speak. Hello, Ibasa. Can you hear me? Okay.
Sorry, my internet got disconnected.
Oh, okay, no problem. So over to you, so you can go ahead. The class is all yours now.
Okay.
I
So, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen.
All right.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, can everybody
Okay.
see? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so I will start by introducing myself. And my name is Epsa Abraham, and I'm a software engineering, and I'm currently working as a head of education at African to Silicon Valley. So what we do at African to Silicon Valley is basically we try and train bright African university students, and we try to connect them with top tech companies. And I think last year we had about 70% success rates of Google software engineering internships and full-time opportunities. So yeah, that's what we basically do as a company. And before becoming, now I focus on teaching data structures and algorithms. But before moving up the ladder, I was working as a backend developer, and now I am data structure and algorithms instructor. So yeah, that's all about me. And if you guys have any question, you can ask me later. So when we move to our today's contents, we will be learning about JavaScript functions and object-oriented in JavaScript, and some of the concepts behind the JavaScript promises. So, so yeah. So how does backend development and the JavaScript relate to each other? That's a very good starting because backend development with JavaScript means so we use JavaScript to build part of the website or the web application that works behind the scenes. So I think since this Java internet connection. Can you hear me?
Hello, Ibasa. Yeah, I can hear you. Welcome back.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, sorry again. I am still having trouble with internet connection. So yeah, and so in backend development, what we try to do is like uh, we are trying to secure the data and we try to connect the front end, which means what people see and interact with to the backend. So backend in the sense is what's happening behind the scenes. For example, when we are watching this uh, tutorial or watching this session, we can interact with the buttons and we can interact with some of the you know button that are on the screen, but behind the scene there are so many things that are going on, and that is what we call backend. And so JavaScript can be very helpful when developing backend, and it is also some way very important for developing the front end as well. Yeah, so that's the background for JavaScript. And now start learning JavaScript functions. And this JavaScript function is like we can call a function. It's a block of code that performs a specific task or a calculation. For example, let's say if we want to, authenticate a user, or if we want to log in the user into our website, or if we want to log out the user from our website. So we will be writing some sort of function that will do the exact task for us. And these functions are some like mini programs, which means they can be called multiple times and we can use them, different many times throughout the program. So they can bring modularity, and it is very easier to maintain the program when we divide our programs into different functions. So yeah, that's the definition of the concepts. And so these functions can take different parameters, and usually they return something. For example, like when we are trying to authenticate a user to log into the website, the first thing that we can pass them is the user's data, and this is called parameters. And sometimes they return us something like, oh, this user is authenticated, or this user is not authenticated. So yeah, that's why we use functions in JavaScript programming. Okay, so as you can see from this example,
So, welcome back, guys. I actually don't know what's wrong with his network. Feels like we have a lot of network issues going on this evening for our instructor. Let's give him about a minute to come back, and hopefully, this time his network will be more stable than what we have right now. So, all right, guys. I think okay, he's back.
Okay, I think it's here already. Yeah, it's back.
He's
oh, I'm
back.
sorry again. Like for how long were I disconnected?
Not for so long. I think you were done explaining the first part.
Oh, I'm sorry again. Like it is not a good time. Like this is like a time where it's kind of hot time for internet. So I'm really sorry. So yeah, okay. Where did I explain this part?
Finally, function. No, I think you were the other slide, the one before this.
Okay. So yeah, okay.
Okay.
So yeah, when I was just trying to explain the syntax of creating a function in JavaScript. So when defining a function in JavaScript, the first thing that we do is like we will be using the function. I know can you see this screen?
Your screen. Yes, we can see your
Can you see
screen.
this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Okay. So when defining a function in JavaScript, we usually start by writing the function keyword. So I'm not sure if it is visible or not. So I will try to increase the size. So we start by writing the word function, and then after that we will be writing the function name. In our case, let's say like if we want to add a numbers from or I will, so like what we are going to do is like we will be writing a function that will add a number from 1 to 10, so let's say, and which we want to call this function so many times. For example, like when we add the number from 1 to 10, it will give us you know uh, it should give us some number that would be, in this case, like 10 times 11, 55. So we want our function to return 55. So what we do is we start by writing the function, and then we give this function a name. So let's call it for now sum2. And then inside this function, there will be some parameters that this function is asked to accept. In our case, like since we are trying to add the numbers from 1 to 10, and giving them the upper boundary would be enough. So we just say n in our case. And then, so after this is how we define a function. So we use a function keyword, and then we give this function a name, and then we pass some parameters. So after doing all those stuff, the next thing that we do is we try to do some computations inside this function. So we will write some statements to be executed. In our case, since we are adding values from 1 to n, so what we will
Hello,
do is,
can you hear
yes,
me? Okay, we can't
yes.
see your code. We can't see your code writer.
Oh, is it not visible or too small
So
to see?
what we can see here is just like a screen. It's showing us that tracker and ads blocker, and I think this is your home screen.
Oh, this one?
Okay, maybe you have to stop sharing and share your screen.
Oh, okay. Okay, so what about now? Can you see my screen?
Okay, yes, we can see your screen. So you just have to zoom in a bit.
Okay, okay,
Okay, can go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
this is okay.
So yeah, what I was trying to say is like, if we want to write a function that can, you know, do a summation of numbers from 1 up to, maybe for example, like in this case, since I was not sharing my screen, I think I have to redo it. So let's say we are trying to write a function that can add a numbers from 1 to n. In this case, maybe if our n is equals to 4, that would be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. This is going to give us uh, 10. And if you are trying to write a function that can do this sort of computation, what we do is like we first start by defining our function, and then, for example, like I will start when defining a function, we usually do give them the keyword function is always important. So after writing the keyword function, we will be giving our function a name. This name has to be descriptive, and if I give this function a name, that would be sum2. For example, let me call it sum2, and then after that, inside the function, I have to write some statement that needs to be executed. In this case, since I am trying to add the numbers from 1 up to n, I have to write a for loop, or some clever JavaScript functions to do that. And that would mean if I'm looping through the elements from 1 to n and trying to write it, that would be for var. I would start from 1 and then it would stop when it reaches to n. I hope you have learned how loop works. And then after that, like I need to have a variable where I can store the results, right? So initially the results were 0 because I wasn't, the results are going to be added inside the for loop. So what I do now is I will add each variables, each numbers into my result. And then after that, when I return the results, so yeah, okay. So this is like how we write a function in JavaScript. So as you can see, we start with writing the keyword name, the function keyword name, and then we give a function name, and then we accept the parameters, and then we write. So like if there's some statements to be executed, we will write those statements, and if we are returning the results, we will be, returning them. So yeah, that's how we write basic function in JavaScript. And I think I have yes, this one. So yeah, so since I am familiar with I usually write Python. I started writing it. So yeah, and as you can see, like this is supposed to give us the same result. Oh, we have typo here. Yes. So yeah, and so yeah, this is our function, and when calling this function, what we do is, let me clear it. So previously, if I defined the function as sum2. This was the function. So when calling it, I would be saying if I want to add the value from up to 10, I would be just passing 10, and then as you can see, it will give me the result I'm looking for. So yeah, this is how we define and call a function in JavaScript. So yeah, I will share you the course, and do you have like any questions on this? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so are there any questions on how to write a function, a basic function, and iterate through the loop?
There are no questions yet. If there are any question, I will draw your attention to it and paste it on the screen.
Okay, okay. So can I ask question students, like it is possible, right?
Yes, it's possible.
Okay, so yeah, uh, as you can see from this example, like I want them to, you know, tell me about the time complexity of this function. I know it is not it's not in our topic discussing about the time complexity, but as a software engineer, you just have to know what is the runtime complexity of the function that you are writing, because it needs to be optimal. And I would like if you guys can write what do you think about the time complexity for this function on the chat, that would be great. Or like if you guys have no haven't learned about time complexity so far, I would be happy to discuss about it as well. So yeah, like if you have any questions, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I said I believe they are okay. Someone said, I don't get the question. Please kindly re-explain, sir.
Okay. Okay. So the question is like this is the function that we just wrote in order to add the values from 1 up to n, and then so basically the question is like, what is the time complexity of this function? Like if you guys have learned it, asymptotic time complexity, uh, that's basically the question. So every function has some time to run and to be executed. And so since we are not talking about the exact time, I was asking about what would be the you know asymptotic time complexity of this function. Time complexity.
So someone said linear time.
Yes, correct. So yeah, like, can you think of a way to optimize this linear time complexity for this specific task, adding the values from 1 up to n? Like, do you have any solution?
Okay, so far no solution yet. So maybe you can go ahead. Once they drop it, I would let you know.
Okay. So yeah, when thinking about solution, think of maths and how you can assemble, how you can arithmetically add the values from 1 to n. And the another topic that we need to discuss is about returning values. And in JavaScript, it is obvious that when we return a function, we need to return something. We need to return something, or we need to modify some sort of states inside our function. So for that reason, it is important to identify the types of the values that we are returning, and if our function is returning something or if it is not. So for example, like in this case, as you can see, uh, we we have written this function, and this function will only return values if it is even, and if the value that if the parameter argument is even, it is gonna return the word even, and if it is not, it is not just gonna return anything. And by default, if our function is not returning anything, undefined value will be returned. Yeah, and it's important to when writing the function, identifying whether we want to return something, or if we just want to modify something inside our function. So if I call this function with argument 2, since it is even, it is going to return the word even. And when I call it with odd values, it is going to return undefined, because it's not going to, this for loop is not going to be, this if a statement is not going to be executed. And now let me like try to show you how to call different a function with different parameters. And by assuming that we have this function, so if we want to call it with like one variable like before, and if we just give them like 15 10, this would return some value 15. And one thing about JavaScript is that even if we haven't identified the entire parameter, we can also pass other parameters to this function, like 15 and 12. If we pass it this function, it's going to ignore the other parameters, and these other parameters are going to be ignored, but they will be stored in some other ways, and I will show you where they will be stored. So yeah, as you can see from this example, like when I pass 6 to the function, it is going to return 21. And when I pass extra parameters, those extra parameters will be ignored, and it's just going to take the value from the first parameter and do the calculation on that, and the other parameters are ignored. And we can also call the function with no parameter at all. Like this is not possible in some other libraries, in some other programming languages like Python or C++. If we define a function and that function is taking some parameters, we have to pass those arguments when calling the function. But in JavaScript, it is very flexible, so it is just going to ignore it, and 0 will be returned if I pass it without any parameter. But there is another extension of JavaScript that we call TypeScript. It's basically adding type on top of JavaScript, and that way these kinds of errors won't be. It's actually not an error, but it's not a good practice as well. So they will be handled when using TypeScript. Yeah, this is how we call a function in JavaScript. We can also give a default parameter to a function. For example, like in this case, if we have a function that says hello and then put another person's name in front of it, and but if the value for if the parameter is not going to be passed, like we can just assign unknown, and we can say hello unknown instead of passing the user's name. So yeah, optional parameters are also possible in JavaScript. And on the topics of the parameters, so JavaScript parameters can take different forms. They can be in the form of function. Function can also be parameter by itself, and we can have literal data types like string and the variable integers, and we can also pass an object as, as an argument to a function. So for example, like I'm sure you guys have learned about the objects and how they work. And if I create an object called person, and then like I give them name, age, and the gender as attributes, and when I call this function that can display the name, age, and the gender of a person, it would be like it will take this object as a parameter. So passing object as a parameter is also possible in JavaScript. So I can show you with an example if you guys want, but I think the slides are self-explanatory, and since I will be sharing the slides later on, we will be good. And other things about JavaScript functions is that they can take many parameters without even specifying how many parameters that we are passing into the function. But I think I've tried to say it before. And these parameters are going to be stored on an object called arguments. And if we are passing all the parameters, all the arguments that are going to be passed into a function will be stored in an object called arguments, like as you can see from this. So even if we are not passing any, even if we don't have any parameter names here, but by default they will be passed into the arguments, and we can do any operation that we want on the arguments object as well. So like for example, if we want to add the values from the lists of numbers, we could just iterate through arguments links, and we can add them all. And there are some functions that we can use, like built-in functions, for example, map. So this map function, what it basically does is it tries to go through each element in array and then maps it to the value that is going to be returned from the function. So I think we should see this one with an example. For example, like if we are trying to make, let's say we have like these values, these arrays, and then we are trying to square each values inside these arrays, and what we basically, the result is going to be 1 4 and then 9. So what we can do is sorry yeah, so what we can do is we can define a function. Let's say this function can be like a square. Let's just call it a square, and this is gonna take some variable, and then we are going to be returning the square of this number. And now I have an array, and this array is as a value 1 2 3, and this is the value that I want to square. So what I will do is basically I would say array dot map, and then call the function square, and then pass the values. So if I just call this function, what it does is, as you can see, it goes through each element and it tries to square each values. But if you look at the array as a result, it is not squared. So you can store back the value that you are getting from this square function, and then now if you call the array, it's already a squared value. So yeah, these are some of the built-in functions that we can use in JavaScript. And if you guys want to learn more about them, like they are very helpful, especially when doing some competitive programming, and you guys should explore it. So we have filter as well, like this filter function. So like this map function maps a value from a function to each values, but filters a value based on some criteria, for example. So if we have these values and we want to get only even values, like we can use a filter and then pass into our function that we want to get only even values. So what we do is, like, this function is accepting this function is accepting so like since I will get back to it later on, but this is called anonymous function. And as I tried to say it before, anonymous function can also be passed as a parameter into another function. And this anonymous function is, I'm currently passing it to this filter function. And what it's basically trying to do is, like, it's just taking the some values and it's determining whether it is even or not. And if it is even, like, we are filtering them and storing them on another values. So let's call them evens. And then when we if we want to use these evens, now we have 2 and a 4, and these are the only even values that we have inside our first arrays. And this filter function is very handy for such use case as well. So yeah, I tried to explore about this anonymous function. These anonymous functions are a function that does not have any name, and they are usually written inside another function as a parameters, and they are very helpful. And so they are also called lambdas. So as like from this example, yeah, this is the anonymous function. So as you can see, it doesn't have any name, and that's also written inside another function. So yeah, that's anonymous name. And they usually, like, what I do is when I teach classes, like I teach certain concepts to the students, and I give them some sort of exercise. But I don't think the today's environment is uh, allows us to do some exercises. But so what on your time when you practice is creating functions and using anonymous function, what I want you to do is like write a function that can sort a name a names based on the last name and the first name. So yeah, try to do that. Here is the code for how to sort the names of the people based on first name and the last name. Try to like look into the solution as well after trying it by yourself. And other concept regarding the functions is like in JavaScript we also have nested functions. That means like functions inside another functions, and they are very useful for some things, but some experienced engineers do not want to use nested function. Instead they want to use, like, they want to make it global, and they use it as a global function. But I think for like small applications and like programming competitions, these nested functions are also useful. You should try them as well. So yeah, and another topic before moving on to another topic is like we should see recursive function, what it does mean. I think I should show an example of what recursive function means. So usually, like as a backend developer, like we try to iterate through graphs, and we sometimes represent data in the form of graphs if they have some hierarchical relationships. And in that kind of situation, it is really important to understand how recursion works. Recursion is basically a function that calls itself with different parameters. For example, like if you are trying to do a factorial, if you are trying to write a factorial of a number, for example, like factorial of 4 means it is like 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. That would give us a factorial of 3, factorial of 4. And in order to write a function like this, like it can be done iteratively, but we can also use some recursive function to write it. So when writing a recursive function, it's usually important to understand two main topics here. The first one is base case, and then the second one is recursive case. Base case means, like, since our recursive function is a function that calls itself, it has to stop somewhere, and that's what we call base case. Base case is basically uh, a condition for which our recursive call stops. And we also have recursive functions or recursive case. That means it's just identifying the recurrence relationship between inputs, and yeah, that's how a recursive relationship works. A recurrence relationship works. So for example, like if we try to write a factorial of let's say, like, let me show you iteratively, and I will show you the recursive one as well. So if I'm doing a factorial of a certain number, I will start with 1, and then for I is less than or equals to, since I'm let's just do it for 4. And then, so in this kind of situation, what I do is like what we normally do is when doing a factorial is we, you know, yes, sorry, yeah, yeah. So let me just make it 5, and so yeah, factorial of oh, sorry, let me copy this function. I've already added. So as you can see, like we can iteratively we can get the factorial of a number iteratively like this, but we can also get them in a recursive way. So when writing a recursive function, we first try to define our function and then give them a name. In our case, it is factorial. We call it factorial, and then our base case would be sorry. Our base case would be like if n is less than or equals to 0, 1, we should just sorry, like I used to writing Python and I'm writing it in such way. So we can just return 1. Else, what we do is like we call our recursive function again, but we multiply it. When calling our recursive function, we would be calling with n minus 1, because like we're currently using n, and then the next factorial number has to be like n minus 1. And this one is also a Python syntax. So yeah, and now if I call a factorial of 5, as you can see, it gives me 120. So, and the factorial of 4 would be 24. So yeah, we can also use recursive function to write what iterative basically does, but it is very important to understand recursion as well. So yeah, now let's turn into object oriented. So in object oriented, like usually there are different terms that we can use, but some of these terms are class, method, attribute, and objectives. And class is just a template. For example, like if we have a dog as a class, we can use them, a dog as whole as a class, and then these dogs can have different attributes such as color, and we call this an attribute of a dog. And we can also identify a method or a function for a class as well. And for example, like this method is defined as a capability of a class, and if we are identifying our class as a dog, like the capability of that class might be barking or sleeping or I don't know, urinating, and then we can also take the specific instance of that class. For example, like we can call a lazy, or lazy maybe an object for a class dog. So yeah, that's a buzzword that we can use in here. This is the concept that I tried to describe earlier, so you can explore it on your own. And in JavaScript, objects are created, used, and discarded we usually use a constructor in order to, instantiate values for an object or attributes for an object. And then some languages, including Java, not JavaScript, but Java, have destructors that can, terminate the life cycle of an object. But in JavaScript, there is no such thing. It can be they use modern uh, garbage collector, and they can, destruct all the objects by themselves. So let's look into an example of creating an object oriented in JavaScript. So there is two different methods that we can use. We can use a function, and we can use also a class as well. But I think it just depends on different types of tests. Like I usually like to write the object oriented in JavaScript using classes, but some of the my seniors also write them in a function. It just depends on the types of the project that you are working on, your specific needs. But so if you are, using class keyword in order to define an object, as you can see from this, we have, a keyword class, and we give them the class name. So in our case, it is dog. And then we have a constructor. This constructor basically initializes the values for this class, or the attributes. And the attributes in the dog class is, we have name and the color, and then we can just, specify them like this. This is initializing them. And then if we have different methods that we can use, for example, like we might say bark. We might, have a method that makes the dog run. If we are, programming some robots or something. And we can also we can also identify write a function for that makes a dog eats. So yeah, and then this is how we use an object-oriented format in JavaScript. And creating an object is easy. It's just like any other program you do in another programming language. So you would start by using some variable declarations such as var. But this we usually use const. And then we have, my dog, for example. It's a variable name that I given to the dogs class, and we create dog by using this name. So I think it should be clear. So if you have any question, please ask in the chat. And the other method of using object oriented is like we can just make them like function, and then we will be initializing it with this variable. We will use this as our constructor, and then some values that can be we can also pass any parameters into our function. So yeah, there's also another exercise. It is creating a function, creating a calculator class to do basic arithmetic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So the code is provided for the solution is provided for the exercise. You guys can try it by your own and see the solution as a guideline. And yeah, the other topic that we need to discuss here is promises, JavaScript promises. And these promises means it's a way to handle asynchronous operations in JavaScript. Asynchronous meaning like if we have too many things that we are doing at the same time, or when things are happening at different times, and like if one block of the code is waiting for the other to be finished, in that case, there might be some issues. Usually there will be some issues, but these issues we try to mitigate them by using native callback functions, and then those callback functions we also have to wait for others. And yeah, it just does, it's not a good way of programming. So we use promises, and these promises help us write cleaner code in a more organized way, and they are so very useful when it comes to handling errors. So this in promises they have three states. Like the first one is pending. When we just start executing a certain task, it is that state is pending, and then after a certain time, there will be two different statuses. One is like fulfilled. That means we are done executing our function, and the function has been executed successfully. So that state is represented as fulfilled. And the another one is rejected. So that means like uh, the state has been rejected. And so yeah, based on these different states, we can adjust our programs that way. And yeah, this there's there is a detailed explanation how to create a promise. You can see that as well. So like there's two types when using a promise. We have to be aware of how to create them and then how to use them in our function as well. So when creating them, we would be using a new constructor, like as we were doing for the class, and we say new and then promise, and then this like will take two different parameters, and the first one is resolve and then reject. And inside this object we can do whatever we want to do. For example, fetching the values from APIs, or I don't know, like usually we fetch the values from APIs, and then after fetching the values we can return the responses based on the statuses. And as you can see from this example, when we are trying to call this function, we use then method, and then this then method will give us the data if it was successful, if we resolved it here. And if we did not resolve it, or if there was some sort of an error, it will be returning the error, and we will catch those error inside our catch phrase. So yeah, this is a detailed example of how to create a promises and use them, like in a real world example. But you can see that as well. And for these promises, I also have uh, put it down some exercises for you to work on. Uh, it has a solution, so you can check those as well. Yeah, I think it was very short, and sorry like if the concepts weren't clear. Yeah, I think we have covered a basic overview of backend and the JavaScript functions, object oriented, and JavaScript promises. So I would like to finish our today's session with a quote. It's from James Cameron. So yeah, the quote basically says, if you set your goals ridiculously high and it's a failure, you will fail above everyone else's success. And that it's a quote that I really like. So yeah, try to make your goal bigger than what you are currently do. And even if you are not getting there currently, that means like you still fail above everyone else's success. I think it's a nice quote. And I have listed some of the resources that I used in order to prepare these slides here. You can look at this as well. And yeah, there is my email, there is my LinkedIn. This is the campaign that I'm currently working on. Like if you guys have any questions, you can reach me out on LinkedIn or email as well.
Okay. So thank you, Ipasa. You have some questions here, so I'll be putting them on the screen so that you can take them.
Okay, okay, yes. So time complexity of a function is basically in computer science. There is every function has to be there is usually we try to identify how efficient our algorithm is. So when you are writing some algorithm, like it has to be efficient because like millions of users are going to be using your program, and it has to be somewhat fast and memory efficient. So in order to do that, we try to grabs these concepts from our program in traditionally by using the time complexity. So that time complexity is how our algorithm performs when the number of the inputs are large. For example, in the previous example, if I gave you, if the n was 2, like we would just only be adding 1 and the 2. And if n is 3, we would be adding 1, 2, and the 3. And assume if n is million, so we would be adding the values from 1 and all the way up to million. And our time complexity would be linear. It depends on the value of the input size. Yeah, that's what the time complexity means. There is um, I'm not sure about this one. I haven't tried, but we can assign them to const, or let's we can see if we can assign var here. Yes, as you can see, we can assign them as well. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Other question. Hello, can you hear me?
Okay. I think one more question here.
Uh, like it depends. For example, like usually uh, when you like like I write Python a lot, and the Python is OOP, and I would tend to say OOP is more cleaner. Uh, but there are also times when functional programming is uh, cooler than OOP. But like I tend for just the way the OOP code is cleaner, and they can easily understand and organize objectives. Like I would say, I prefer to work with OOP. like functional programming can be messy sometimes. Okay. I see. Like, so wasn't it, if we call this function with it wouldn't return any function. Like I didn't call it. I just try to see if this function or not. That's why it gave us the function. But if we call it, it would give us. It would execute the values that are inside the function, inside our the things that we are trying to execute. Uh, then and the catch is when we are using the promises, we but like in cache and trying the caches are just the normal ways of trying to handle an error. Mm, they they are just normal ways of handling an error, but then and the caches are a way to handle a promises. They are different. Like if you are using TypeScript, like like there was a project called Lab Connect that I worked on recently, and we used TypeScript for that project as a backend. And yeah, like it was a lot of OOPs involved, but uh, like it's not that common, but it is also common. Depends on the project. But we used the OOP for our last project in HSP. Okay, I would love to. But I think like in order to understand promises, like we first have to understand what asynchronous programming means. Like the only reason that we are using promises is because like when we are executing something, for example, like if we don't have a promise here at this point, and then when we are trying to fetch here, like we are trying to fetch some data from API, and this API might be busy at a time or at a moment, and then like we a line of code after this would be waiting for this line of code to execute and they get the results back. But when we are waiting, like this is not a good idea to wait for a function, a certain line of code to get the results and continue the linear execution. So instead, what we try to do is like we try to, do other things while that function is fetching the result from somewhere. For example, like if we had some codes below here, we can it can be executed when this fetch function is getting some data from somewhere, some data centers, and that's why these promises are important. And then in this case, like I'm fetching the API data, and this dot then function basically specified that if the data has been fetched from this API correctly, or if there is some sort of response, uh, we would look at the response status. And if the response status is 200, that means we have got the data that we are looking for. So we say this issue has been resolved, and we can just return the body of the response. But if not, we can just reject this promise, and it is just like saying, I promised to give you the data, but I couldn't fetch the data, so I'm gonna just send you an error. So this reject function is gonna send an error to our promise caller. This is like if we have the response, and sometimes we don't even have the response because of some internet issues, or I don't know, there might be a lot of issues. We might not even reach to the API server. In that case, our catch function will get the response, and still it is going to send us the state of our execution, which is failing, or an error. And so this is like how I defined my promise. And if I'm calling it, I would say get the data, and then if there is a data, I would basically let me just log it here. And if there is no data that is returned from this side, basically, or like if this one has rejected an error one, or if this error was returned, I would just console an error. I think that we can. This is like too long to write on this, but you can see from the example, and understand what uh, this promise means. I hope it is clear. Yes, like I try to do Django's. Like I think, yeah, they are cool, but they tend to be more slow when if you are not trying to optimize them. But yeah, Django's are very very cool. Like I think I learned it backend first with Django's. Yeah.
So, hi, Bisa. That was the last questions we have here. So,
Okay.
thank you so much for coming on the call and taking us this class. I think we learned a
Thank you.
lot from the class. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, guys,
Thank
you
you.
can go ahead to follow him on LinkedIn. You'll be getting the material, so it's easy for you to just follow him on LinkedIn. Also, I'll be dropping his LinkedIn handle in the chat, so you can also just connect to him. If you have questions, go ahead and ask him. I think yes, he'll be willing to answer. So, Ibasa, are you more active on LinkedIn?
Yes, like I'm currently active. Yeah, you can reach me out anytime you want.
All right. Okay. So thank you
So
so
yeah.
much once again. It's nice. It was nice having you here. We learned a lot. So have a
Mm.
lovely night's rest and bye everyone.
Okay. Thank you for having me. It was great. I wish we could have interacted more, but yeah, like, it was nice. Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Thank you too.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.